Okay, good afternoon and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. I think Dr. Chani may be evening there in Asia. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. This is another Tekedia Live. Today, we have the privilege and honor to welcome one of our faculty members, Dr. Henry Chan. He is an expert in the domain of digital commerce in the beautiful, great nation of China. Everyone wants to know about China, especially just yesterday or just this week, the Chinese government published a 5-year plan. You know, the plan is like everyone wants to know what is going to happen in China in the next 14 years. So we are so honored from Tekedia Institute to host Dr. Henry Chan. So, Doc, let me just note here that most of our members are connecting through YouTube Live. Some of them cannot use Zoom when they're at work. And we are also recording this section for our portal. Some of them are watching through the portal. So, because they can't use Zoom when they're at work. This is at the peak of the day in West Africa. It's essentially 12 noon in West Africa. So, some of them cannot do Zoom at work. So, typically, the first 15, 20 minutes is to give a talk. Then after that, we go through question and answer. So welcome, Dr. Chan, and now over to you. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you to Mr. Moderators. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you. Please, gentlemen, ladies, can you confirm also? I can hear him.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear
Yes,
you.
sir, we can hear you clearly.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So I guess I have to greet everybody a good afternoon, right?
Yes.
In Nigeria.
Yes.
So I'm very happy to be invited to talk about these topics. And I really share the view that if one look at the development history of China, in 1978 is one of the poorest countries. And then in a span of 43 years, the country grew to be the second largest economy. And hopefully that in another 7, 8 years time, this is going to be the largest economy. So it just shows to you that if you work hard and dream hard, nothing is impossible under the sun. And I think that what is the most important thing that the Chinese story share is that there are some very basic issues about working attitudes, governance systems, and I think that this is not just unique to China. Every country can have it. So I digress a little bit. So I now go back to my topic proper. I think that everybody has already looked at the PowerPoint and also listened to the lecture given online. So what I'm going to talk is just a very brief recap of what is in the PowerPoint. And I will spare as much time as possible so that we can have a more interesting and dynamic interactions. Now, if you look at the e-commerce, definitely there's no doubt in the world that China is leading in the application of e-commerce. Now, e-commerce was actually started in the United States in the 1990s. In fact, the very pivotal moment the Chinese start to have the e-commerce taking off is in the year 2003. That was the time that this SARS hit China quite hard, even though it just for a matter about 4 months time. But the very strict order of this isolation really make people start going into the e-commerce space, particularly the retail e-commerce. So in reminiscence, like it or not, this COVID-19 also make people realize the importance of e-commerce. Because of isolations, we have to detach from the normal interactions that we have. So we have to rely on the new tools. And e-commerce provide really the new tools. So when China started in 2003, the whole model was an exact replica and copying of the United States. And one very important highlight I want to say is that it's not just the copying of the United States that make China's e-commerce the largest in the world today. But it is how after copying, they set up the whole system, the whole physical infrastructures that facilitate the growth of the e-commerce. So one thing I want to emphasize is that as a latecomer, there's nothing wrong for us to copy. But after copying, how we are going to improve on it to suit the local conditions, in addition to improve upon the system, to get the most out of it is the more important element of
Hello?
success. Hello? Can you catch up? Hello, hello?
Doctor, go ahead.
Yes,
I think
go ahead. You can hear you, sir.
Okay, great. So first is if you look at the second slide, now China is estimated by next year or this year, they will have 50% of the retail sales in e-commerce.
Excuse me, Dr. Chan. Actually, we have not shared your slide because it's scheduled later in the program, so they have not seen the presentation. So you could just give an overview. We'll share the presentation later on with the class.
Oh, okay, good. So now, first is I will just, since you're going to look at the slides later on. Now, first, China now is the largest e-commerce market in the retail space in the world. By this year, China's e-commerce will account for more than 50% of retail sales. Now, just remember 10 years ago, both China and US has about 5%. How come China can grow that fast? It's because they have put up the infrastructures that's very suitable for e-commerce. And number two takeout is that if you look at the e-commerce, it's just not selling things on the net. E-commerce helps a lot for the Chinese SME, small and medium price enterprises. And I think this is one thing you can have a very important takeaway in the case of Nigeria or in any other developing countries. Don't look at e-commerce as a luxury of the developed countries. Developing e-commerce is very meaningful for developing countries as well, because that is a very good tool for small and medium scale industries to grow. Why? You must remember, all those multinationals, they already have the brands. Their products are well known. They can afford to spend on advertisement to let consumers know their products. And this advantage is not enjoyed by the small and medium enterprises. But because e-commerce, in a way, liberalized the communication channels, it is in the e-commerce that the small and medium-scale enterprises has the very low-cost entry to the consumer's mind. So this is another important takeaway. And third, e-commerce must be able to deliver values to the consumers. Behind the very fast growth of e-commerce in China is the government has laid down the communication facilities, the payment facilities, and also facilitate the express delivering facilities. So how come in China e-commerce can prosper? Number one, the small and medium enterprises can offer the goods very cheaply in this platform, consumer benefits. Number two, the payment system and the express delivery system make the consumers receiving the same goods even cheaper than he himself go to the supermarket, because there is no intermediate delivery point of supermarkets that we have to rely on. So if a country is very serious about this pending issue of social inclusiveness, about this issue of the social divide, helping medium and small scale enterprises is the right way to grow. And putting up the facility and the payment system, the facility, I mean the delivery facilities and the telecommunication facilities, to allow SME now holds very important social and political significance to any developing countries, as well as the developed countries. So essentially, these are the things that I share with the groups. Number one, To address the issue of social inclusiveness, e-commerce is a very good platform. Number two, what makes e-commerce success is actually infrastructures and innovators. I am sure every country is not short of innovators, but they cannot make their work feel because they cannot have the infrastructure supporting them. So I think the infrastructure support after the COVID-19 is over should be emphasized by all the developing countries because we have already seen very serious social division problems ranging from the United States to many other developing countries. This, these pandemics opens a lot of social division issues. And I'm sure everyone wants to know how to address it. Now, another very important thing is we all know that we are in the threshold of fourth industrial revolutions. And to your surprise, actually e-commerce drives new technology adoptions. When people talk about big data, when people talk about automatic warehousing, when people talk about drone deliveries, they all talk about e-commerce. So in other words, if a country has a very thriving e-commerce, it is a very good technology driver, is a very good platform for SME, is a very good platform to solve the inclusiveness problems, and is a very good platform to address social divisions. So with so many birds hitting in one stone, I hope that the PowerPoint that you are going to read, the lectures that I'm going to have already been recorded, will give you a significance of this space. Now, we all know one fact. Technology revolution is the biggest driver of economic development. If you remember that in the 20th century, there are two very key important development theory. The first one is the Solow models. He talked about your labor, your capital, your technology inputs. The other one is the Schumpeter models talk about innovation driving economic developments. For your country like Nigeria or any other African countries, never forget the role of new technology can play. You are not talking about a 1 + 1 = 2. You are talking about a 1 + 1 = 3 or equal to 4. Now, if there's anything that the Chinese experience can tell you is Chinese are very focused on technologies and they have a very technology driving development models. And as the moderator has said, in this 14 5-year plan that they talk about, the details will come out next week. At the end of this week, you will see that they are putting a lot of emphasis on innovations. And they are putting a lot of emphasis on technology-driven innovations. So I think that's all I share with the groups. And now my time is 15 minutes after. And as I promised, let's leave more time for all the participants to join in so you can ask some more questions that you will not normally read easily in the books or in the magazines or in the newspapers. So I end my presentation here. So let us have an open forum from here on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chan, for that overview of the e-commerce in China. Just like you noted, if a people work hard, that great things will happen for them. I mean, the story of China is the story that will inspire any generation of people. So we are really so honored to have you here. So members, now we're opening up the question and answer section. Please, if you have any question, just raise up your hand and let's start taking the questions. So, Doctor, I have a question here actually. When you noted on infrastructure, that infrastructure is a very important part of the e-commerce revolution in China. Then in 1999, Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba, he made a video where he noted that in 1999, that the e-commerce space in Africa today is actually better than the position of infrastructure and e-commerce in China. But from that 1999 to now, of course, Alibaba has become a very big company. Is there any way you could explain how China was able to prioritize facilitating this infrastructure and what any region in the world can do to copy that or adapt that model that built up that infrastructure within a very short time? So Alibaba founders say that in 1999, it took about 3 hours for the Alibaba.com page to download. But just within less than 10 years, China built one of the fastest internet. So if you could share anything about that infrastructural investment from China and the strategies they use, we'll be very happy to know. I don't know if you understood my question very well.
I understand your question.
Okay.
Actually, I emphasized already in my earlier presentation is that people just look at Alibaba. People forget that what makes Alibaba works. Now, to give an example is that in the 2020 Singles Day, which is November 11, 1111, now Alibaba's communication structures was able to handle 580,000 transactions per second. Now, China has been right in doing three things I've been emphasizing. They provide the communication network because I read in the question and chat box, many of you cannot hear carefully and many of you have a problem on connections. So people forget it is not just the data bank, it's not just the data center of Alibaba that can handle 580,000 per second. That is important. How about the fiber optic cables going to the data center of Alibaba, right? Now, for your information, China since 1980s when they opened up, this is a very high savings country. China's savings rate is 40 to 45% of GDP. And out of which they always invest about 40 to 45% of GDP. So one of the lessons that actually the China or the East Asian models offering you is people must save. Now, this is not very Western today, but you remember about 150 years ago, the West also saved a lot. They don't spend. But today it seems the culture is different. But in the sense of China, there is no harm for any developing countries to save. Because without savings, you cannot invest in infrastructures. If you believe in the story of borrowing money to invest, then you are putting yourself at a great risk because there is economic cycles. Your borrowings might be called by the lenders when the cycle is bad. Now, out of the 40 to 45% Chinese investment every year, they very consistently invest 8 to 10% on physical infrastructures. Now, you remember I talked about two very important infrastructures that only the government can provide. First is telecommunication infrastructures. And number two is that the payment framework, the payment infrastructures. And of course, the third is the transportation linkages. Now, but transportation linkages is normally more expensive, but telecommunication and payment actually on the whole is not that bad. If a country consistently invests about 2 to 2.5% of GDP on these two things, they can be modernized very, very fast. So the success of Alibaba is, number one, the government built the physical infrastructures. And number two, the government paid the payment infrastructures. Now, can you imagine the peak rate of MasterCard or Visa every second is only around 50 to 100,000 transactions. So Alibaba alone can handle 6 times what Visa and MasterCard do. And you remember, Visa and MasterCard are doing on a worldwide basis. And Alibaba, like it or not, 90% is inside China. So there are some innovations that Alibaba pioneered, which is what? Because 20 years ago, everybody talked about Chinese goods. Everybody has the idea of poor quality, fake goods. How did Alibaba address these issues? You remember when you buy from Alibaba, Alibaba will hold the payment to the seller for 7 days before they will release it to the seller. But and they allow you a 7-day window to return your goods. If you receive the goods and find it not to be in good quality or in good orders. So how can that work? It can only work if you can receive the goods within 7 days. And based on the survey of JD.com and Alibaba, they can deliver 90% of the orders within 2 days from their warehouse, plus another 2 to 3 days in transit. That is why this thing works. But in many places, if the delivery takes you more than 7 days, this guarantee will not work. So Alibaba do some innovation on the model, but model is not everything. And one thing I noticed very sad is when everybody study e-commerce, they always focus so much on the models. They forget that the models they want most of the time cannot be done on the field because the field has no infrastructure to support it. This is one of the lessons that I think that I hope the Chinese success can share with you. Don't just focus on business model. Focus on something that is doable on the ground. I hope that my answer your question.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, members, please, if you have any question, unmute yourself and let's get this started. And if you have any question, because we just have only 1 hour here, and we will just have, if you have any question, let's make sure we get it out as quickly as possible. Yeah, so I have a question here from the board, Doctor. So what's the question here is asking if you could share more light on China's e-commerce global vision or strategy. It's asking if Alibaba plans to expand outside China or other parts of the world, and what can that teach innovators from Africa and other regions?
Actually, China faces a very serious problem. I think Jack Ma was right. Actually, Chinese handling of English is not as good really as many outside countries. I'm sure Nigerians on average speak much better English than the Chinese. So if you look at their attempt overseas, I will put it into two spaces. First is that if you talk about sourcing Chinese goods and export out to other countries, China is very successful. I think everyone heard about Yiwu, right? Because I understand there are a lot of Africans stationing at Yiwu and at Guangzhou. So sourcing Chinese goods and export to other countries through this small e-commerce package, they are very successful. But on localizations, they are not very successful. If you look at Alibaba bought this Singapore's Lazada, and they are trying to use Singapore as the platform to export to Southeast Asia, they fail. Okay, so one thing I want to share with the group is even Alibaba want to put up a Nigerian branch. I don't think that they'll be very successful. If you look at Singapore today and Indonesia, the local e-commerce platform is always doing better than imported platform because you know the goods that your people want better than Alibaba. Okay, but that is really one advantage now Chinese e-commerce is enjoying. There is no official data how much Chinese export through the e-commerce channel to overseas. But if you look at the scale of Yiwu warehouse, I think they have about 2 million square meters of shops and about 100,000 shops relying on e-commerce platform selling overseas. And people's conservative estimate is that Chinese SME was able to export to the world in the tune of 100 or 200 billion US dollars of small items that sometimes do not reflect in the custom data. So, but one thing I want to encourage all our listeners, if you are creative enough, you can establish very good local platform that can be the Chinese e-commerce platform to your local markets. I hope that I give you good answers. But that's really how I feel.
Absolutely. And doctor, you keep bringing this local SME space in China. I think that is the missing link most times for the world. People just think that the website is what drives this great support ecosystem within the digital platform. But you have been consistently saying there are the SMEs, there are the small companies in China, and those are the feeders into the network, which actually bring in more value within the e-commerce system. So if a country does not have entities that make things or provide the goods and services which people are actually coming to pay, you may have a missing link. And I think that is the very strong comparative advantage that China has with other parts of the world. If they try to copy Alibaba, you don't copy the SMEs and the manufacturers in China, you're actually going to have a problem somehow. Mm. Mm.
Oh, you're exactly right. I agree. But actually, this Alibaba, have you heard about a term called Alibaba Village? Now, this term
No,
means to
I've not
say,
heard of Alibaba Village, actually.
it's like this. Actually, Chinese government has a project that asks this e-commerce platform to help those poor localities. You remember early this year, President Xi Jinping announced that China was able to essentially take away poverty from the Chinese, right? So how they do it is this. They assign Alibaba to a certain place. And Alibaba, because of its volume, he can advise this certain place, hey, what is your local product that is sellable in the platform? Okay. And because Alibaba has built such a reputation, so people will not look at that village. And can I trust the seller in that village? But I will trust Alibaba. And Alibaba is like another Walmart. Now, what did Walmart do to the overseas suppliers? They send technical advisors to advise them, okay, this is your native products, so you have a certain cost advantage. So once you have a certain cost advantage and the market is using this kind of a processed product from raw materials, now I advise you how to make that products. That is what actually Walmart is doing for a long, long, long time. So it's an issue of mindset. Now, China has an advantage because China is the manufacturing capital of the world. Okay, but there are some industries Chinese advantage is not really as good as the local advantage. One of the best cases is the food industries. I don't think China export a lot of food through the e-commerce space, right? Because what the Africans eating, what the Nigerians eating, what the Indians are eating, definitely only they themselves know. So what I mean to say is that there's a lot of local industry, particularly the agriculture space, that a e-commerce platform can really introduce a lot of value. And another thing you must remember is in countries not very well developed, in which information is not very well developed, in which your science structures and technology structures not very well developed, the gap between producers and consumers is very wide. But because of an e-commerce platform, all the producers become very instantaneous recipient of the latest technologies. And in fact, if you ask me, I think that the e-commerce space actually accelerate a lot of technology adoption in China, which are the things that many business schools forget to take note of. They just look at the numbers per se, but they forget that it is the intangible of technology adoptions that bring a lot of values for developing countries. And I always maintain one point is that if you remember the story of technology adoption of China and how poor they were before, there's no such thing that the poor countries is shut out of technologies. It is just you have to do it smartly, carefully, that one day you can easily catch up with developed countries. It's the mindset problem. I hope that I give good answers to your questions.
Yes, absolutely. So Remy Adelepo, please go ahead and ask your question. Remy.
Okay, good evening, sir. Thank you, sir. My question is two. I'm currently living in China, in Shenzhen to be precise, and I've tried to import some African food down to China, but the major problem I encounter is the fee of a flight to bring it down here. I've tried so many agencies, but the fee is always very challenging. That's one. And also, I want to ask that what other opportunities can I explore with the e-commerce here in China? Being a foreigner here in China, what other opportunities do I have that I can actually explore with the e-commerce here in China? Thank you, sir.
Greater Bay Area is one of my research area, and I was all constantly amazed by what happened to Shenzhen. Now, I can understand your problems. As a foreigner living in China is not easy because you don't speak the language. So one way I would suggest,
yes,
that is your biggest problem. But to be fair, Chinese normally are quite friendly to outsiders if you can talk to them. But they are very shy if they cannot communicate with you. So I have a suggestion is this. Freight is a problem we cannot handle much, particularly today. You know what happened to the container pricing, right? And you can imagine what happened to the air freight pricing.
Yes, it has really skyrocketed. It was very expensive.
Yeah, but I have a suggestion is this. Since you know your place, and now what you are doing is that you go around the Chinese shops, and then you look at their products, and you buy from them, and you export doing e-commerce. Another way is that, why don't you think about that? You operate your own shop in China and do some of your own designing, and you ask the Chinese to make this contract OEM for you. That is one way that you can add a lot of value to your platform. So I don't know whether I'm because you are in the place,
sir.
You're closer to the ground. But another thing very helpful is this: really try to learn some Chinese. I think that will be very, very helpful.
I've started.
No, because my wife is a Chinese teacher, and I always advise her.
But what if I want to bring in?
Pardon?
Okay, what if I want to bring in food items into the country?
Bring in from Africa or bring it out of China?
From Africa.
That is the problem. Actually, Chinese has a little bit very strict phytosanitary requirements. I don't know your experience, but my personal experience is that this is already phytosanitary requirement. And there's probably not much you can do, I suppose.
Okay.
Let's go to Francine, please. Go ahead, Believe, please. Unmute yourself. All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this fascinating conversation, Dr. Shan. You mentioned a lot of time mindset, and I want to unpack this thing, what this mindset problem is, and how do you see that? Because I know that's quite a lot to unlock, definitely comes from mindset. What was the mindset that Chinese actually use to really propel themselves where they are? And what can we learn as well in Africa to make sure that we can also not copy the same mindset, but use the same ingredients to get to where we want to go? Can you unpack that for us, please?
There are several things I can mention. Number one is that China has been a very enterprising people. And to them, I think you heard about the famous saying of Deng Xiaoping, rich is glory, right? So that is not very communist. It's really cultural. And number two is that, China has one of the highest incidence of ulcers and stomach illness in the world? Because in China, when the business comes, they can really not eating and just finish the work because that makes money. Now, another thing is, if you look at the Chinese factory, we have a listener earlier who is living in Shenzhen. You know that in China, how come that this Foxconn can have 800,000 people staying in company dormitory at the peak at Shenzhen? So I have not seen any country in the world you can build a factory town and people travel 1,000, 2,000 kilometers away and just go home during holidays. So it makes the production system very profitable. That is what I mean by mindset. Rich is glory, so work hard to be rich. And number two is this. I have noticed that. Have you found out that I don't know about Nigerian university, but for so many university I go, who is teaching innovations? The number one is the business school, not the engineering school. Now, but in China, if you know how deeply embedded is the engineering culture, why? Because since the Opium War, all the Chinese believe that it is science and technology that will save the country and uplift the countries. So if you talk about senior government leaders, so many of them are actually come from a background of engineering. So why I emphasize is that if you want to do something new, aside from the business model innovations that we think is the right way to go, we have to also look at the issue of is it doable or not, which needs an engineering cultures. So that is also what I mean by mindset. Now, everybody know that Jack Ma is an English teacher. But do you know that he has 18 warriors with him when he started up Alibaba? Most of the 18 originators are engineers and computer science guys. So the mindset is when you do some innovation ideas, study very carefully the technology backbone you need and make sure that what you are doing is both financially feasible to you and also technologically doable at the same time. This is what I mean. I hope that I give you good answers.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much. And I actually want to make a comment there, Doctor. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom, when England, I mean, the whole of UK had their best moment in terms of economic development and advanced productivity in the economic systems. Some of their leaders were actually from the technical fields. But over a time in the House of Lords and the House of Commons, lawyers, people that study philosophy, I mean, I'm not saying that these are not great fields. They now started changing those technical field, doctors, engineers, scientists with lawyers, philosophers. And then if you look at the curve, as you are reducing and replacing the engineers in the House of Lords and Commons with the lawyers and philosophers, and the economy was actually showing a coordinated scope. And that's when we talk about China, you see they bring a lot of technical people to lead very critical aspects of their systems. And the world has seen a very strong correlation on how that economic system has been doing. So that's one question I have here. Somebody is asking, are you really sure that the China GDP is not already larger than the US GDP? You know, I collect it to my own question, where I'm just making the point that leaders with technical fields are being used a lot in China. America used to have a heritage, but now you need to be a lawyer actually to, to get to so many things in the United States as a leader. So if you go to Visa and MasterCard, they process in 2019 or so, $16 trillion of total gross transaction value. In other words, Visa and MasterCard process 16 trillion. But Alipay, which practically serve only China, process $18 trillion of transaction. So the question from the board, how do we reconcile that US is still a bigger economy than China if MasterCard and Visa, which basically we expect to cover the whole world, is processing 16 trillion? Why an e-commerce payment system that started less than 30 years ago in China is processing 18 trillion? So just your perspective on those 2 points. Thank you. Yeah, doctor, it's like you're muted. We can't hear you. You need to unmute your microphone, please. Sorry. Unmute your microphone. We can. Is the sign?
Okay. Is it okay
Okay, great.
now?
Thank you. Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Now,
Thank you.
I will tell you this. Actually, China's GDP, if you measure it on a purchasing power parity,
Yes,
they're
yes,
already
yes.
larger
I
than
get
the
it.
US in 2014.
Mm.
Now, we are talking about nominally.
Yes, I get that.
So China now is about 72% of the US nominally. Of course, there are so many projections that in 7 to 8 years, China will be larger even on nominal. Now, there's a pricing issues. For the ladies who came from Shenzhen, you know that in China, you take a public transport, you pay only 1 renminbi or 2 renminbi, depending on whether there's air condition or not. In the US, if you are going to have this public transport, $3, $4, $5, if you're lucky to get one. So that's a pricing issue. Now, on this MasterCard and Alipay, I will give you one example. That is why there is going to be a looming war in the next 2 years between the China central bank digital currency and all these payment systems. All of you are in business, I suppose, and I think that you know that if you use credit card and when you are the seller, Visa or MasterCard nominally will charge you around 2 to 5% as merchant fee. In the case of Alipay or VPay, he only charges you 0.6% as merchant fee. So why we want to use this so-called cashless payment? Because it's more efficient. The world is spending about 3 to 5% of the global GDP on payment handling. So this central bank digital currency, because it's issued by central bank, it does not even have to charge the 0.6% of Alipay or VPay. So that is why I said, how can Alipay and VPay prosper? Because they were first used extensively in e-commerce. So I want to correct one thing that I've been saying at the very beginning is technology is the cheapest thing in the world if you know how to do it. But if you don't know how to do it, you have to buy it. It's going to be a very expensive thing. So for the developing countries, build up your technical skill, invest in the necessary physical infrastructures, and save more so you can invest more and cut the process short is still the winning formula to me and my advice to all the developing countries. Now, if you look at what happens in Texas in January, if we look at the distribution problem of the COVID-19 vaccine in the United States, actually, I'm sure that many people now have a soul searching about what kind of emphasis one should have. Now, in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, there are two rights. Actually, one is political right. The other is social and economic rights. I think for all the developing countries, we have to take a very good balance of the two rights. If we keep on mentioning the first one and forgetting the second one, we might be in trouble one day because of the very divisive social divide that we have experienced in this COVID-19 pandemics. These are my 2 cents on the subjects.
Okay, great. So do we still have more questions, members? We still have 15 minutes here, but it looks like 2 hours because of the deep insight. So there is a question here. Just some HP users say takeaway infrastructure, technical skills, saving culture, and technology are the backbone of China's e-commerce of success. And I think it's not just only e-commerce, I would say, largely for any sector of that economy. So Doc, this 5-year China's plan, the new one that just came out this month, do you see anything from the angle of African business that you think you could share with us? You know, whenever China shakes that agenda, the world pauses because we know that China is always good in executing whatever it says it wants to do. So what do you think will be an opportunity, or how can businesses in Africa reposition themselves as China begins to execute for that 5-year, 14-year plan? Thank you.
The most important take I have of this China's 14 5-year plan is their devotion to technology and innovations. Now, if you look at the past 10 years, I think everybody all of a sudden realized that China is a very innovative country. And now if they are going to develop their own technology system, I think one of the most important things that the African countries can benefit is, why don't you send more students to China to learn how they do things? So when they go home, you can have your own African corps of engineers, you can have your own African infrastructure developers. And these are the most long-term thing I think you can gain from this 14 5-year plan. In the process that China become a technology giant, the Africans can learn the technology of China and bring home what you have to do. Now, actually, China was very lucky. You must remember when China started opening up in 1978, we have not heard about the crisis of climate. We have not heard about the crisis of water. We have not heard about the crisis of pandemics. We have not heard about the crisis of deep social divisions. And now if you look at all this timeline, it seems that we have to solve so many problems in the next 30 years. Everybody talk about 2050, that the global temperature is going to rise by 2 degrees. And even Africa, you don't have as much water problem. But in the Asian subcontinent, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, the water crisis is not something that is just on imaginations. It's already happening in many places. So to me, if the Africans can send more students to China to learn how Chinese develop the new technology space, that is the most intangible things I can think of as of this moment. And of course, we all know that Chinese infrastructure is a lot cheaper than the European American infrastructures. But when you borrow money, you have to make sure that it works for you. You can generate the return. Now, there is one thing I want to use this occasion to highlight to the African colleagues. Most of the money China uses in the Belt and Road is sourced from Exim Bank or China Development Bank. These banks source their money from China on commercial basis. And that is also what they lend to the Chinese local government. But in China, because of the very fast economic development, all these loans largely is sustainable. But in African countries, it seems that after you get the infrastructure, you do not put it into good use. So you get into some kind of a debt problems. Now, I don't think that you can blame either China or the African countries, but I will say that you have to have the more holistic view about development. Most of the development ideas today are really related more to mindset and reality on the ground. So if Africa want to tap China for development assistance, first look at the reality on the ground. Only you can decide what is best for you. China cannot decide what is best for you. I hope that is my very frank answers.
Thank you so much. So we still have 10 more minutes to go here. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think just like everyone knows that everyone is fascinated when we look at the trajectory that China followed. But for us here in our program, we are looking at it from the individual business angle, not necessarily at the national level, because we are not governments. So when China was on this trajectory of exponential economic growth, the small companies and the big ones in China benefited. What do you think, looking at your understanding of the African business space, what entrepreneurs, innovators, and companies within our program, how do they position themselves to capture value, even if they are not in China, but let's say they are here in Africa? Well, because we are looking at how to do more with China, because the world sees it as the future. Of course, we are not saying that the Western Europe and North America, that they do not belong, but China is seen as certainly the destination of the steady state of economic dominance in this century. So how do we prepare? How do we position ourselves to make sure that we can capture a lot of value strategically and also economically as business people with China? Thanks.
Actually, the African is very lucky today. Why I say that? Do you know that in the 5G space, China is the most successful in Africa? Because unlike the other places, there's a lot of geopolitical considerations. But in telecommunications, Chinese is doing much more robust business in African continent. Why I mention this 5G? Because this 5G has certain features that really makes SME a lot of opportunities to develop new use case. If you just think about 5G as a faster broadband, you forget that actually these instantaneous short latency features and these IoT features make 5G very relevant to every countries, big or small, developed or developing. If you look at the very famous uh, digital payment in the crude form, the mobile banking, you'll be very surprised. Africa today, many countries leapfrog even Western Europe in mobile banking. So my advice to the student is spend a little time on your YouTube, learn a little bit what this 5G can do for you. And I'm sure because of the geopolitical tensions, you might be very surprised. African countries very likely will get 5G services much faster and earlier than many people expect because of the Chinese push. I am actually advocating the digital Silk Road, and I give quite a number of talks on digital Silk Road. And Africa is going to be a key beneficiary of digital Silk Road because African countries has been the most friendly to adopt Chinese Belt and Road projects on a regional basis, second only to Middle East. If you know at how fast Middle East is adopting the latest technology in telecom infrastructures, you'll be very surprised that Middle East and Africa can really tap the latest technologies. And there are so many opportunities in the latest technology for SME, particularly one area of digitizations I think most people overlook, that is agriculture. There are so many things in agriculture that this 5G and this Internet of Things can do for you. I hope that I give you good answers.
Yes. Okay, so this is really amazing. There is a small comment here on chat, but the gentleman is asking, how is China getting all this money is lending to, to the world? I think you've answered that already. China sells a lot of things to the world. But there is a little political part of it. He's asking, when you lend money to Nigeria, you lend money to Africa, do you monitor what the politicians actually use that money for? So, I mean, that's not why we are here. But if you think you can comment on it, this is a very big concern that Africa is taking a lot of debts, and the roads, the railways, at the end of the day, the debts are written down, but you can't see those infrastructures because of how the people are managing those projects. If you could just, I think it's the last comment. Then with that, we'll just round up today. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope everyone have a good day.
Okay, I didn't hear you.
Oh, thank you very much. And I totally agree with you. as citizens of Nigeria and of Africa, you really have to exert pressures on your politicians. So this is a catch-22 issue for China also. So thank you very much for the invitation of the school. I hope that my 2 cents idea is going to be helpful to your study. And I wish everybody a good day. And remember, work hard and study hard is still the way to go.
Yes. So thank you so much. And that's your last word for us, or do you want to just give us a real proper last word, Dr. Chan, so that we round up? And we'll talk. Thank you so much. If your last word, then we will call it. We're done.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
And thank you. And have a wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening or afternoon anywhere you're. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Chan.
Thank
Dr. Chan. That was quite insightful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.